It's kind of a strange ground scrape here. It's long and narrow like that. Look at all the pine needles piled up on the end here. It's been pawing away here. You know, at first glance I thought, well, probably a young deer made this, but I'm kind of thinking it was a big one. I don't think a young deer like a yearling buck or a 2.5-year-old buck would take the time to scrape a pile of needles like that. Big, pretty good pile there. Dig into the ground a little bit. It's an early ground scrape. The bucks are just starting to make ground scrapes now. We're starting to get the kind of temperatures at night that we need for them to do that. But not far from here, about this time last year, we found a ground scrape about 10 feet long, you know, rather than a circular one, a real long one here. And I'm thinking the buck that made this one is the same buck that made the bigger ground scrape, you know. This one, if you kept coming back to it, it might end up being way back. Looks like it's even scraped over there a little bit. So I think this is a characteristic of that one big buck, and we may find more like this before long. There's an area up here ahead we call Pine Knob, and that's been a place where this one buck has been making ground scrapes for a couple of years, so big long ones. So it's kind of weird, you don't see them like that very often. But, and it wasn't just some quick, 30-second ground scrape. This guy spent some time doing this. So anyway, it's a ground scrape, an early one. During the next 2 weeks, or during the next 2 weeks, that buck will start visiting this scrape often, and it'll probably widen and look bigger. I wish I could be around here to see that, but anyway, that's an early one. We're always glad to see that, and I do believe this is a sign of a very big buck, a really big one, the guy that makes that kind of a scrape. So, looking forward to. I've got some nephews and a son or two that'll be hunting out this way, and this might be something for them to think about. I'll have to let them know when I get home what I found here. Well, back to work scouting. We've been looking for ground scrapes while we're scouting. One of the reasons we scout 2 weeks before the gun season starts is so that all deer will be back in their home ranges doing normal things by opening day. Some of these deer, like at older bucks, they can abandon their ranges quickly and not come back for as long as 2 weeks. And we don't want that to happen, so we start early. So we're kind of at the time now, mid-October, when here in northern Minnesota we normally get freezing temperatures at night. And when that happens, that usually triggers a frenzy of making antler rubs and ground scrapes. And so here, about 40 yards away, are 2 beginning ground scrapes. They aren't as distinct as they'll be later on, but these are just beginning. And here's another one right here. A lot of guys would walk by that and never recognize that as a ground scrape, but it is. And you can see over on the other side where the buck is scraped back toward the camera there. He stood there and he scraped it with his front paws back like that. So he probably scented that ground scrape with urine and tarsal musk and tarsal glands on his hind legs. So from this time on, the amount of tarsal musk being produced by the tarsal glands inside the hind legs of a buck will be increasing in volume. Finally, the buck will really, or some bucks anyway, some of the big dominant bucks will really stink with tarsal musk about the time that when breeding begins. Breeding will begin here, in this area right here, on November 3rd. And it's not, it's not a carnival like a lot of hunters think, like, gee, there'll be does running all over and bucks with them, and it's going to be easy to get bucks. Only about 10% of does are in heat at any one time over a 2-week period of time. There's actually 3 breeding periods for whitetails between early November and the end of the second week, or the beginning of the second week in January. 3 2-week periods. But during this first period, on any one day, there's probably only going to be about 2 does and estrus per square mile. Not very many. And 1 or 2, there might be days when there's none, but only 10%. And each one is only an estrus for 24 to 26 hours, just for a little over a day. So that doesn't last very long. So it's not a big deal when when breeding begins. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy to get big bucks. It's still going to be hard. But at any rate, it's beginning. This beginning of this period where they start making ground scrapes is stage or phase 2 of the whitetail rut, and it usually begins about mid-October in northern states and in Canada. So there's the beginning. It's what we're looking for. More bucks to hunt. You know, each season, each hunters in my camp starts out well, especially my 3 sons and I. We start out every season with to hunt at least 2 or 3 different bucks, because you don't always win out. You know, if you goof up on the first buck and he abandons the area, then you're kind of stuck. You don't know where to hunt next. But knowing, this is a range of a big buck, by the way. It's a great square mile range, actually, a really rugged one. And there's always been a big buck, big dominant buck in this particular range as long as I can remember, for 28 years now. But we start out each season looking for existence of really big bucks. When you find something like that, we know there's a nice mature buck. I can't tell you if that buck was a 3.5-year-old or a 6.5-year-old, but it's mature, meaning the antlers are pretty well developed, and there's some mass to the antlers, and they're the kind of bucks, when they walk by here, in this territory where my 3 boys and I are hunting, we have a hard time turning one like this down. In fact, this one might be really a big one. We don't know that yet. But we know he's here. And this trail in this area, in the Pine Knob and beyond and to the east of here, are part of his territory. And when the hunting season begins, if one of my sons, like the one who's taking this movie here, is heading to a stand site way on the other side of a really high hill we call Moose Mountain, if he finds very fresh tracks like this on the way out there in the dark in the morning, like it was just, the ground scrape was just renewed, he's very likely to back off downwind and take cover somewhere in the immediate area within easy shooting distance. I do that a lot, and most of the big bucks I've taken in the last, well, since 1990, have been taken because I did that. We always key on very fresh signs. You know, you can pick a great stand site, and you can go there in the morning early, like I recommend that you do. But if there's no fresh buck sign there, no fresh adult buck-sized tracks or adult buck-sized droppings, or maybe a freshly renewed ground scrape, if those kinds of things are there, it's not a good stand site. Your odds are not particularly great. All those things have to come together, but the deer has to be there in the vicinity. And the way we know when one is deer is one where we find fresh signs made by a mature buck that hasn't been alarmed, and we're particularly careful about not alarming them. We don't worry about it when we're scouting, because we get into everything, and we know we're going to alarm some bucks. But during the hunting season, that's different. But that's the way we do it. But so, doesn't look like much, but now we can add another big buck to our list of bucks that are available for us to hunt this year.